I think that as a child survivor and watching my mother go through this particular process, I know it can be quite overwhelming of who to call, where to call, and when you're dealing with so much, emotion and fear and not wanting to escalate a situation, because of course it can be a matter of life and death if somebody is caught trying to escape. So I just think it's so important to say that even just reaching out to a friend or a neighbor is the first step. It doesn't have to be even reaching out. Would you agree with that, Samara?
Absolutely. I keep stressing how and why the community piece is much more important right now, because that little bit of, hey, are you okay? I'm here for you. You're not alone. It can be absolutely life-changing. As I look back at my journey, those are the moments that I remember the most. You know, when someone got me a coffee because they just wanted to be kind to me. When someone cared and showed me that I wasn't alone and I was human. Because what abuse does is dehumanizes you. It makes you feel that you don't matter, that you're invisible, that you're dispensable. Whereas when when someone shows you that you're not, someone shows you that you actually matter, that can go a long way in giving you hope for a better future and for a better outcome. So just knowing that yes, there's good people out there, there are options out there, can go a long way. And I'm a big believer in reaching out for help. And I, Assaulted Women's Helpline. I'm glad you mentioned that, Paulette, because that's a helpline that I used to call almost every week, especially towards the end of my marriage when I was planning on leaving, to build a bit of a safety plan. Like, what is it going to look like? Because what really keeps women trapped is that ambiguity. Like, I don't know what's going to be after. Like, where do I go? How do I pay my bills? And especially with women who are racialized or newcomers, and they don't really know about their basic rights. They have never been allowed to go out of the house or get a job or pay their bills and all that. Like, I was a child bride when I came into this country. I was 16 when I got married. When I got here, I was 18, and I had no high school education. I was married off when I was in high school, and then I was completely dependent on him, not allowed to go out of the house. So I wasn't even aware of my basic rights. Like, what does it look like? How do I fill gas in a car? How do I pay my bills? How do I get a credit card? Like, all those things were completely unknown and intimidating because everybody else seems to know them. So maybe I'm the stupid one here, So that's why the importance of community outreach and, family members and friends coming out and saying, hey, we've got your back. You're not alone. It can go a long way. So to give survivors a sense of belonging and a sense of hope.
And Marc, can you speak a little bit to, because I think a lot of people feel that in this particular isolation period and with the pandemic, that some organizations may not be active or may not be operating during this time, especially an organization like yours that has to go into homes in order to help move, women and children who are, trying to get out of their situation. Can you speak to where Shelter Movers is at during the pandemic and how you've adjusted, if anything, what you're doing or not?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think the pandemic has fundamentally changed how we've had to operate. So Shelter Movers offers free moving and free storage to women and children fleeing abuse. Our volunteers and staff operate in Vancouver and Toronto, Ottawa, and Halifax. And now what we've seen with the pandemic is expressions of interest from more communities across Canada asking how, as you say, Rhiannon, is Shelter Movers still operating? Are we still helping women flee? The answer is yes. We're moving about 60 families a month at the moment, which is on par with any other day. And what we're hearing are the types of calls that we're getting are slightly different. So these are elevated risk situations. And I think when we think of survivors and their experience, as I think Paulette, you very rightly pointed out, it's very tempting to simplify a survivor's experience. And I think the important point that we remember at Shelter Movers is the diversity of experiences of the people we serve. Women with disabilities, Indigenous women, newcomers, the wealthy, the not so wealthy, they're all experiencing this in a different way, and how they ask for help and where they ask for help will be very different as well. But I think to your point, Samra, reliability is very important. And so we've spent a lot of time now updating our procedures and making sure that our volunteers are operating in a safe environment. So we have PPE for all of our volunteers, and yes, it's expensive, and yes, it's hard to find. But if we're going to offer a reliable service to help women and their children flee, we need to do it in a way that keeps them safe and keeps our own people safe. So I would say the experience of women in rural communities is really weighing on me personally a lot these days. We know that women have, survivors have fewer resources in rural areas, greater fear of a lack of confidentiality. If you do ask for help and you jump in a car with someone, hopefully they're keeping your privacy secure. Shelter Movers spends a lot of time maintaining safety, and not just the physical safety, but the information safety and information privacy of the families we're serving. And so we get a lot of calls asking about that as well. But 60 families a month is 60 families a month. And I think our volunteers are doing what they can. They're putting themselves at risk. I think we can all agree that frontline healthcare workers are critical to us getting through the pandemic. I would urge folks to remember the frontline non-healthcare workers who are also, as you said, Samra, in people's homes. We're on our hands and knees getting the children's toys out from under the bed, and we've got our masks on and we're covering our faces and we're washing our hands. And these are people who are not getting paid to do this. They're doing it because it's the right thing to do. They're doing it because their neighbors need them. And I really applaud them and what they're doing. So this is, I hope I can offer some frontline perspective to our discussion today, and that would be an example of that.
Thank you. Now, obviously, we know that the barriers to leaving an abusive situation are very difficult without a pandemic situation on our hands, for sure. So I know that there's going to be additional barriers, and we've just discussed this. What is the Government of Canada doing, Minister, in order to help financially support women who are leaving right now? What sorts of measures are being taken?
Well, first and foremost, we're drawing our inspiration from people like Paulette and Samra and Marc, the people who have either had the courage to tell us their stories in the hopes of us being able to prevent suffering for someone else, or the ones who, despite everything they're going through in their own personal lives, are going above and beyond the call of duty to help. So in the day that the pandemic hit home for us, for my team and I, was the day that the Prime Minister had to go into self-isolation. And we just went into a different gear. And we picked up the phone and we reached out to our stakeholders, leaders in this sector across the country. And I'm so grateful to them because they always pick up the phone. They always say yes, despite everything they've got on their plates. And they all said the same thing. They said shelters and sexual assault centers are the last places she'll go. And they're already at capacity even before a pandemic. So the first thing you better do is make sure that those organizations have what they need. And, I brought that up around the cabinet table and, the Prime Minister, without missing a beat, hearing that not every home is a safe home and being reminded of it, immediately said, okay, we're on it. The next meeting, Bill Morneau, our finance minister, showed up to the table with a $50 million package. And this is the first phase of our response. And what we were asked to do was to deploy funds as quickly as possible to the front line, something that, by the way, Status of Women Canada, my department, we haven't provided operational funding to organizations before since 1998, but we have provided the most significant investments to build the capacity of organizations over the past 5 years. About $250 million was invested. And those dollars and those people are working for us right now. We partnered with Women's Shelters Canada. Lise Martin is the fearless leader there, and Canadian Women's Foundation with Paulette Sr. at the helm. And we signed an agreement with these two organizations and said, how quickly can you transfer the funds to the front lines? And they said, well, we could do an e-transfer within 48 hours of getting the funds. So to date, hundreds, I think it's over 700 shelters and sexual assault centers in the country have received direct support into their bank accounts because of all the ways that the Canadian Women's Foundation and Women's Shelters Canada have hustled and made the arrangements to get cleaning supplies, to ensure proper physical distancing, to come up with business continuity plans, to come up with a plan to prevent an outbreak, because that would be disastrous, and then to come up with a way to respond to a pandemic if it happens. There's also a $10 million contingency fund for organizations that are neither sexual assault centers nor shelters. We are working with our provincial and territorial counterparts. And just so everybody knows, it's a really positive relationship with those colleagues to ensure that we're filling the gaps as the federal government, that we're not duplicating efforts. And the whole point here, and Quebec, of course, is different. We signed a different agreement with them. The whole point here is we want women, mostly women, but in all their diversities, and children to know that if their home isn't safe, they do not have to stay there, that they can call Women's Shelters Canada, they can reach out to Canadian Women's Foundation, they can reach out to someone they trust, and don't give up if some shelters are full, because while some are experiencing a, up to 400% increase in their demand, there are some who are telling us that it's eerily quiet. That for all the reasons around isolation and confusion about whether or not shelters movers and shelters in general are operating, the calls are down. But we are expecting a surge in support, some 20 to 30% increase. And we are working with our very smart partners to come up with phase 2 of our approach, so that no one who's seeking help is turned away. And Samra, as we speak, my team is reaching out to you to figure out, what we can provide you in terms of information, so that that friend of yours who wasn't able to get help is directed to a place that is open to her, that is going to take care of her, and is going to help her rebuild. In addition to shelters, as Samra said, financial insecurity is a big reason why too many don't leave. The Canada Emergency Response Benefit is at $2,000 a month guaranteed income to those who are experiencing loss of income due to COVID. And you can go and apply online, and within 48 hours, that money is transferred into your bank account. So please, for the love of God, do not let fear of financial insecurity during the pandemic keep you or your loved ones in an unsafe situation.
It almost feels, in a way, because of the pandemic and the level of support that has now become available as the government responds so adequately to the needs of so many Canadians, that now may be actually the best moment to leave. Now may be the moment where there are even more resources available in order to support and help. Paulette, would you tend to maybe agree with that? Because that is a very positive message, I think.